in late August, Kanye West dropped Donda, his album. And then early September, we saw Drake drop Certified Lover Boy just a few weeks ago. Just a few days ago, I should say. Today, the Big Ten and Kevin Warren's counterpunch, their special drop was the Big Ten men's basketball schedule. In conjunction, Indiana University released the non-conference part of the IU basketball schedule. And that's what we're going to break down on our rapid reaction here today on Wednesday, September 8th, where I'm joined by Indiana HQ contributor Jevan McCoskey. We're just going to spend the next 15 minutes or so taking you through a video breakdown of what we are seeing on this 2021-22 men's basketball schedule for Indiana University. Of course, the first year of the Mike Woodson era. Jevan, I'm going to share my screen real quick to pull up the men's basketball schedule as we see it right now. But first, give Hoosier Nation your initial thoughts on the 21-22 men's basketball schedule as it officially hit our inboxes earlier this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit before we started recording that there might be one or two games on here that, maybe we could have scheduled someone a little bit tougher at the beginning of the season. But I mean, when you play in the gauntlet that is the Big Ten, you're gonna have an onslaught of tough games throughout the entire year, both home and away. So my immediate reaction is it's gonna be tough. We play in the Big Ten, it's gonna be tough, but there are games at the beginning of the year that we're gonna be able to get some wins under our belt, and we're gonna be able to gain a little bit of confidence when we move into the Big Ten schedule. And it's always nice to see a game played on your birthday. So that's definitely cool.
See, I'm COVID or not, I'm never going to have that experience. I've got a May 17th birthday. So neither football nor men's basketball are going to be playing unless something absolutely horrible happened. And we've seen absolutely horrible stuff happen, and we haven't had a game scheduled on May 17th. Let's dive right in. Hoosier Hysteria was officially announced that it's going to take place on October 2nd, the same day as the Indiana-Penn State football game. We're still awaiting some additional details about the logistics of that event. But here, I've got our schedule page up from IndianaHQ.com. It has been completely updated for your perusal. Just some initial notes, 31 games on this slate, 11 non-conference, 20 Big Ten. Of course, there are those two Big Ten games that take place in the first week of December as usual, and then the final 18 contests are all conference games, out of the 31, 19 of those 31 games are at home at Assembly Hall. Finally, fans will be back in attendance in Bloomington and Simon Scott Assembly Hall. 11 of the 31 games are true road games, the 10 in the Big Ten plus the one at Syracuse. And then you've got your one neutral site game against Notre Dame in the final installment of the Crossroads Classic at Bankers Life Fieldhouse. Then the Big Ten tournament will take place in Indianapolis. That is from the days of March 9th to March 13th. So let's start from the top, Jev. The first few non-conference games, Indiana starts their season November 9th, a Tuesday night, at home against Eastern Michigan. I saw one thing that was interesting here. The EMU head coach is also making his debut for that MAC school, Stan Heath. So Mike Woodson, Stan Heath, both guys coaching their first game. And as you see this game, Indiana should come away with a pretty comfortable win, right?
Yeah. And you mentioned both having, first game experience. I think Mike's got a little more experience under his belt. I don't know this other coach. But yeah, no, should start off the season a clean 1-0. Hopefully it's not, we've seen in the past where an Indiana State comes in first game of the year and they beat us at Assembly Hall. So hopefully that doesn't happen when Eastern Michigan comes in into Bloomington. Hopefully we start off the season 1-0 and it's a clean 1-0. Hopefully there's no close game going on. Hopefully we walk away with that victory. Pretty easy victory.
That Indiana State game is sacrilege around Hoosier Nation, Jeff.
I'm from Terre Haute, so I kind of feel both ways about it.
Stan Heath, by the way, he has a good amount of experience.
Yeah.
Fun fact about him, he's actually been a collegiate head coach at 3 different stops along the way. He has a head coach at Kent State, and then at Arkansas, and then at South Florida. What's interesting about Stan Heath and his time as a head coach at Kent State, he was actually in charge of the Golden Eagles when they faced Indiana in the Elite Eight, the last time Indiana made the Elite Eight in 2002. So Stan Heath making his return to Assembly Hall. I think, Jevan, as I look at these first few games, one final note I did want to mention about that Eastern Michigan game, of course, fans in the stands. I mean, for the first time since March 7th, 2020, when Indiana lost on senior day to Wisconsin, the Hoosier faithful will be able to come to Assembly Hall and watch their basketball team play. Super exciting. I'm sure even though Indiana is going to probably be a 25, 27 point favorite in that game, the fan intensity and the fan environment will be like it's a top 10 matchup.
That's what I was just getting ready to say. I think you could put me, you, and 3 other Indiana HQ contributors out there, and I think that the place would still it'd be packed and it'd be rocking. Like it's gonna be having fans. We're gonna see it this weekend whenever IU football has their first home game, and we don't play the best team, but it's gonna be packed and it's gonna be loud, and I think you're gonna see that whenever we play Eastern Michigan on the 9th.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's called them the Golden Eagles. Kent State's the Golden Flashes. I apologize sincerely to the Kent State fans Kent State fans that for whatever reason, they're not even on the schedule for whatever reason, if they tuned into this rapid reaction episode. As a look at the first 6 games, Jevan, all at home. And let me, you can look at these matchups over on indianahq.com/schedule. As I look at these first 6 games, you've got to think Indiana's banking 4 wins without a question. The other 2 that I've got my eye on are these 2 games right here. The first one, the first high major team to face Mike Woodson in his first year at Indiana, St. John's, led by Julian Champagnie, comes to Bloomington. And then the game that follows that, Louisiana, they're going to be a tough out. I expect Indiana to win by double digits, but that game could be a little bit uncomfortable. Let's talk about St. John's real quick. Gavitt Games, Big East opponent, Julian Champagnie, the star. Let's talk just high-level stuff. How intense do you expect that game to be? Do you envision Indiana coming out on top as things stand here on September 8th?
Yeah, this St. John's game kind of reminds me of a game. It was my freshman year in 2018 when Marquette came to Bloomington. Yeah. And Marquette, St. John's isn't ranked, but Marquette was ranked, I think, 24th or 25th at that time. And Indiana blew them out of the water. Now, we know what happened the rest of the season. It didn't go the way we wanted. But that was a statement game towards the beginning of the season, and I think this could factor in the same way for Indiana. It's going to be Mike Woodson's first, Power 5 conference game against as a coach.
Yep.
And I think that if this game goes south, that's when that Louisiana game gets a little bit more interesting. Mm-hmm. But just focusing on the St. John's game, it reminds me a lot of the Marquette game in 2018. Hopefully, we get the same result, and hopefully, it feeds on to the rest of the season as a positive note for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, this St. John's team, they have a decent collection of players. I talked to you about Julian Champagnie, who turned down an NBA opportunity to return to the Red Storm. They've got a good point guard in Posh Alexander. Purdue transfer Aaron Wheeler is on that roster as well as Rutgers transfer Montez Mathis. They're coached by Mike Anderson, who used to lead an Arkansas team that Indiana fell to down in Fayetteville early on in the Archie Miller era, and Romeo Langford was on the team. So as far as I'm concerned, the first segment of this schedule is really the first 6 games. Eastern Michigan on November 9th through Marshall on November 27th. I think Hoosier fans understandably are expecting 6-0. I think that's what the expectation is. And that St. John's game is going to be close. I'm not thinking Indiana's going to wipe the floor against all these teams. I've told you the 4 wins that I expect Indiana to get comfortably, but even St. John's and Louisiana, I think Indiana is going to be favored in those games, and the expectation is that the Hoosiers win, even if those are close contests. And then things get a little dicey. Okay, the heat gets turned up a little bit in the oven, in the microwave. College basketball, after that initial phase, the intensity picks up, and you can see these next 3 games here from November 30th to December 8th. Got that holiday feel in the air, that wintry crisp, as Indiana first heads to the Carrier Dome to take on Syracuse in the Big Ten ACC Challenge. And then Nebraska opens the Big Ten season for Indiana at Indiana before the Hoosiers head to Madison. Jevan, break down these 3 games for me. What are you expecting here? Of course, just year 1 for Mike Woodson, but you know how passionate Hoosier fans are. What should they look at as far as these 3 games are concerned?
The second you said Hoosiers head to Wisconsin, this chill went down my spine. Going to Syracuse again. IU has a history against Syracuse, obviously in the tournament. How it all went south whenever Tom Crean was here. It's on the road. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be our first. Other than St. John's, it's our real first true test of the season, especially as a road game. And then as we head to Nebraska, Big Ten season starts. Hopefully, that's not too tough of a game. Nebraska lost some talent to the league this last year, and then December 8th at Wisconsin. I don't even want to think about that game yet. When's the last time we won in Wisconsin? It's been a while.
March 9th, 2001. I just
there
looked
it is,
that
right
up,
there.
so that date is fresh in my mind. If you're on this YouTube page, you can see that earlier this afternoon we uploaded an article breaking down the entire 2021-22 men's basketball schedule. And 3 of the games I highlighted, I didn't write a blurb on every single one, but 3 of the games I highlighted were the 3 games in this stretch. You had to Syracuse, home Nebraska, at Wisconsin. To give you a little bit additional detail on that Syracuse game, it's the first true road game of the schedule. Syracuse has NCAA tournament aspirations, totally justifiable, totally validating, but there is going to be an adjustment process for both teams. So you have to keep an eye out for that. Plenty of new faces on both rosters. Nebraska, of course, comes to Bloomington, Big Ten opener for both teams. Intriguing matchup. Nebraska adds 5-star Bryce McGowens. They add ASU transfer Alonzo Ridge. That's Arizona State. Indiana will be favored almost certainly in that contest unless there are a whole host of injuries that I don't want to get into. And then December 8th, road trip to Wisconsin. I told you guys the last date Indiana went to Kohl Center and won March 9th, 2001. And as I put down in this article, if Mike Woodson pulls it off in his first try, build him a statue. I would support the use of funds in that fashion.
Real quick, I do want to mention the teams that you see on November 30th, December 4th, and December 8th are not going to be the same teams that you see in February or in March. Maybe not Nebraska, but those are Indiana, Syracuse, and Wisconsin are all 3 teams that are going to have, aspirations of playing in March. I don't think that the teams that you see necessarily on those game days are going to be the same teams. Like they're going to change throughout the finishing months of December, January, and February, and even into March. So while those games are very important to the season, don't get caught up on maybe what you see from both sides. Because if Indiana goes into Syracuse and for whatever reason wipes the floor with them, don't think Syracuse is, not going to have a great season, not going to find their way into March, because that's a very good program. Same thing with Nebraska and Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you think about Syracuse, for example, they add fringe 4 or 5-star freshman Benny Williams. They add transfer Cole Swider from Villanova. They add Symir Torrance from Marquette, Jimmy Boeheim, the coach's son, from Cornell. So that's a team, new faces, much like Indiana, lots of adjustment, a lot of adaptation. And Indiana-Syracuse matchup is definitely one that I think both teams will look at and say, if we win, that win will really pay off once you get into February or March. Yeah. You can bank a nice resume booster against Syracuse, and that can really help your resume as you head into Selection Sunday. Then Indiana plays Merrimack in a non-conference contest on December 12th. Let's talk about the game that follows, though. Notre Dame, December 18th, final Crossroads Classic game. Notre Dame comes in number 45 in John Rothstein's top 45. So, it's a team that is definitely going to think of themselves as an NCAA tournament team. This is always an interesting matchup, Jevan. Help make sense of IU versus Notre Dame.
Yeah, well, I can almost guarantee there's going to be some sort of fireworks. It's the Crossroad Classics. Yeah. Indiana likes to play close games, and especially against Notre Dame. And when we saw it when Armand Franklin hit the corner 3, when his return back to Indy, we saw it, years ago when Zach McRoberts got the rebound, threw it to Juwan. Juwan got the dunk. Yeah. It is the last year, like you mentioned, of the Crossroads Classics. So I think the game is going to be a great game. I think, like you said, Notre Dame is a top 45 team according to John Rothstein's, but it's going to be a good game. It's going to be a game that, like the Syracuse game, I think later on in the season you can look back at it and say that's a big win for whoever decides to take that game.
Yeah, absolutely. And then non-conference play ends up with 2 games that should be surefire wins against Northern Kentucky and UNC Asheville. Jevan, hit me with a prediction, man. 11-game non-conference slate. 11-game non-conference slate. Let's take Nebraska and Wisconsin out of it for now.
Okay.
The heavyweight matchup, so to say, in the non-conference portion: home St. John's, at Syracuse, neutral site Notre Dame. Hit me with the number here. 11 games. How many do the Hoosiers win?
At least 9.
All right, I like it. I like it.
I'll say 10.
What's the L?
Syracuse.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm gonna tamper it down a little bit. I'm gonna say 9. Yeah. I think at Syracuse is an L, and then maybe Notre Dame. I could see Notre Dame trip up Indiana at Bankers Life Fieldhouse. I'm gonna say 9. We'll see how it plays out. I also think Indiana might beat Notre Dame and trip up against one of the other teams that we put outside the top 3 in this non-conference slate. So I guess for Hoosier fans, general expectation, 9-10 wins in this non-conference portion, and that takes out the Nebraska and Wisconsin bit. I loved the comment on our Twitter page that came earlier. I'll pull that up in a minute, but we had somebody respond to a tweet of ours and say Indiana could start the season like 14-0 or something, and I was like, that is here we go. It's Indy sports.
You might start 14-0.
It is. And you know what? If there's one thing Hoosier fans don't lack, it is unbridled passion and confidence.
Yeah,
that's exactly what we like to see. I will say, look, I'm not going to make fun of Indy sports guy. Do I expect 14-0 to happen? No. But is it unrealistic? Not really. So, we'll see how it all plays out. Now let's dive into the conference portion of the slate here, Jevan. Just friendly reminder, all of you here, you've tuned into a rapid reaction video here off of Indiana's 2021-22 men's basketball schedule release. It came out earlier today on Wednesday, September 8th. Jevan and I are going through, highlighting some of the key games, talking about the sequencing that we're seeing here. It was announced earlier in this process that Indiana faces the following Big Ten teams just once all year. At home, those 3 teams are Illinois, Michigan, and Rutgers. The 3 Big Ten teams Indiana will face just at Assembly Hall. And then the 3 Big Ten teams that Indiana will visit only on the road: Iowa, Michigan State, and Northwestern. So the other 8 Big Ten teams Indiana will face home and away. The Hoosiers start their second half, their Big Ten chunk of the schedule, the 22 chunk of their schedule, the 2022 chunk of their schedule on the road at Penn State. First year head coach battle again. Mike Woodson for Indiana, Micah Shrewsbury for Penn State. I don't know, Jevan. Penn State's always a weird place to play, but as I look at it, Indiana's getting an easier ramping up of their schedule here. It's gradual. It's not baptism by fire.
Yeah, no, it's I can't put it any better than the way you just put it.
Yeah.
They're getting a ramp up, and starting at Penn State isn't obviously the best place to play. You'd love to start the majority of your Big Ten conference play at home, but there are worse places to play than at Penn State for sure to open your Big Ten season.
And then Indiana goes into their first Big Ten homestand of the year. Games 4 and 5 in the Big Ten slate. Ohio State and Minnesota come to Bloomington the weekend of January 6th through the 9th. Fun fact about the schedule: Indiana always has at least 2 days off between every game that they play. There are no game, day off, game sequences. There are no Thursday, Saturday sequence, or Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday, Monday. Indiana's got at least 2 days off between each game. And interestingly, Indiana plays pretty much 2 games every week in the Big Ten slate. Their only extended break comes between January 29th and February 5th, where they have a full 6 days off between games. Otherwise, pretty much 2 games a week every week before the Big Ten tournament. So Ohio State and Minnesota come to Bloomington. The main note there, as far as I'm concerned, is Joey Brunk's reunion. He currently transferred over to Ohio State. All indications are that he's a full go for this upcoming season, and Joey Brunk will return to Bloomington for the first time after his 2-year stint at IU. That should be a nice moment at Assembly Hall.
I was gonna ask, do you think he gets hit with cheers, or you think? Yeah, because Indiana fans, they're nuts. So like he could walk in, get to the free throw line, and just get heckled more than anybody we've ever seen.
It's the it's one of two Big Ten reunions that we're going to talk about on this Indiana schedule. I think it'll be a positive reaction.
It should be.
I think Indiana fans have a soft spot for Joey Brunk. All indications that his interactions with the Hoosier fan base and the Hoosier community were all positive and generous and encouraging. And I think that will be reciprocated at Assembly Hall on Thursday, January 6th. By the way, times and TV have not been released for any of these games yet. So stay tuned over to our Twitter page at Indiana HQ, and we'll have you updated as we get that information. Indiana's got another easier game, January 9th, home against Minnesota. Indiana will be a big favorite in that game. I would be surprised if Minnesota didn't finish last in the conference this year. They're a team going through a major overhaul. Again, another first-year coach in Ben Johnson. So I think Indiana's going to start their Big Ten season 4-1, 3-2. Staying above 500 is always important. Of course, Ohio State will almost certainly be a top 20 team when they come to Bloomington on January 6th. Then the first road trip, not all that bad. Again, Indiana's slowly turning up the heat. A lot of the bigger games come in the middle or end of the schedule. And I think for year one under Mike Woodson, that's pretty favorable. You start with a January 13 road trip to Iowa City, and then you go further west. I think my math is right. Further west to Lincoln for a Monday road game, January 17th against Nebraska. 2-0 here, Jevan. 2-0.
Well, Indiana loves traveling to Iowa and playing well when they're there. And when you look at that team, they've lost, a majority of their scoring. They've lost so much. They might be another one of those teams that struggles, or especially early on in the Big Ten, the Big Ten schedule. So yeah, I have no problem with saying that Indiana should walk into Iowa City and into Lincoln, Nebraska, and walk away with 2 wins.
Let's zoom out here for a second. Indiana's first Big Ten games, first 6 Big Ten games are Nebraska, road Wisconsin, at Penn State, home Ohio State, home Minnesota, at Iowa, at Nebraska.
5-2.
That's pretty great. Hoosier fans are going to be sipping the Kool-Aid after that Nebraska win on Monday night. The bars on January 17th are going to be hopping in Bloomington. I mean, Indiana, if they sit at 5-2 after 7 games in Big Ten play, my gosh. And then, of course, if you dig deeper and you see that the quality of the play is really good, that's going to really fire Hoosier fans up, to say the least. I would put a sort of a underline after that Nebraska game. I would highlight that Nebraska game and call the days between that Nebraska game and the Purdue game that follows as sort of the line of demarcation in the schedule, when it goes from easier to tougher. Okay. Before January 18th, generally easier games. After January 18th, it gets serious, and you see a lot of the powerhouse Big Ten teams on the schedule, starting with January 20th, when Purdue comes to Bloomington. First rivalry game, I should say, of the Mike Woodson era. It is interesting, though. This is the first of a 3-game homestand for IU. So, Jevan, you look at these 3 games on this home slate in late January: Purdue, Michigan, Penn State. Make sense of it for IU basketball fans.
Well, I think the first 2 games where we face off with Purdue and Michigan might be the toughest back-to-back games we have all year. I mean, there's another little stretch where we go to Wisconsin, and then we travel to Ohio State later on in the schedule.
Yep.
But I think that those are teams that are projected to finish maybe 1 and 2 in the conference.
Exactly.
Or at least in the top 3. So it's going to be tough. Walking away 2-1. If Mike Woodson can go and do in 1 game what Archie Miller couldn't do in 4 years, beat Purdue just once in his first game against Purdue. You talked about building a statue if we beat Wisconsin and Madison. He might have to build a second statue if we beat Purdue in his first game. So I think if we walk away from those 3 games 2-1, that's a positive. If it's a close game again, because I don't think we're going to beat Michigan, and I think if it's a close game against Purdue, but we maybe don't win, of course, Indiana fans are going to be through the roof. But
Sure.
if we walk away 1-2, I don't even think that's necessarily a bad thing, especially if we start off 5-2 like we talked about.
Yeah, and so much of it will come down to how the team is playing going into this stretch of games. Of course, Assembly Hall is going to be rocking. That's going to be this is going to be a particular week in the schedule where the IU basketball team is going to really lean on the fan base, something they couldn't do last season, to give them support, to give them those additional 4, 5, 6 points in a game that can make the difference. So we'll see how that goes. One note I came up with, I stumbled across in my research to put that article together earlier today. The head-to-head record between the teams since 1949, Indiana 66, Purdue 66.
Of course it is.
Of course, yeah. Indiana has the point differential advantage for those that care deeply, as a tiebreaker of sorts, I guess. But of course, in recent times, no question about it, Purdue has taken 9 straight in the series, 12 of 13. So Indiana's obviously got a tall mountain to climb, beating the Boilermakers even at Assembly Hall. That Michigan's game's going to be even tougher. Michigan's a better team than Purdue is, if you ask me. At this point, it's going to be even tougher. Of course, it being a Sunday, students likely back on campus. Should be a fun atmosphere, to say the least. I would not be surprised if that got the CBS treatment, that game against Michigan at Assembly Hall on January 23rd. And then you have a bit of a relaxer January 26th against Penn State. Of course, if Indiana drops consecutive games to Purdue and Michigan, could be their first 2-game losing streak of the season. You have to bounce back with fire, with anger, with passion to knock off the Penn State Nittany Lions. Things don't get any easier. Road trips in 3 of the next 4 games. The next 4 games read like this: at Maryland, home Illinois, at Northwestern, at Michigan State. Jevan, Maryland's always a tough team. Fun fact, Indiana has not won at Xfinity Center ever, especially since Maryland's conversion to the Big Ten about a decade ago. Illinois is always a tough matchup. It's always a close matchup. And then you got road trips to Northwestern and Michigan State. What stands out to you about this 4-game stretch, 3 of which are on the road?
I'm going to love to see the Kofi and Trace Jackson Davis matchup in the Illinois game. Hopefully this can be the game where Trace finally gets that win against Illinois and Kofi. But what sticks out the most to me is Miller Kopp's return to Northwestern. I think we talked about Joey coming back and getting cheered. I don't know if Miller's going to get that whenever he goes to Northwestern. I really don't. I don't know what the Northwestern fans are like, but maybe they will. Who knows?
I don't know how many Northwestern fans there are, to say the least.
There's enough. But no, that's what sticks out the most to me. And because I think Miller's going to be a very vital piece to our team this year, and seeing him go back to Northwestern is going to be something that he's definitely circled whenever he looks at the schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. He even sent out a tweet earlier today saying something like, "This is exciting. This is interesting," with the schedule being released. To me, one note I mentioned earlier, you do get that full week off between the Maryland and Illinois games. So even if that Maryland road game is a bit rough, Indiana has a chance here with Woodson, as well as the assistants, Dane Fife, Kenya Hunter, Yasir Rosemont, to reevaluate, reassess what game plans need to happen, what strategies need to happen before Illinois, Northwestern, Michigan State. I think Miller Kopp will get a pleasant reaction. That's my prediction at this point. I think it'll be a pleasant reaction. Of course, I expect half the crowd, if not even more, to be Indiana fans. And of course, with the schedule being as tough as it is in this particular portion, Indiana will very possibly will be looking to Chicago area Hoosier fans to help push the Hoosiers over the top in that contest. Would not be surprised if there's a game day visit from ESPN for either the road game at Maryland January 29th or the road game to Michigan State January 12th. I don't know anything, just speculating, but would not be overly shocked. The final segment of the season, the final 6 games, mid-February into early March, let's dive into that section of the slate. Wisconsin comes to Bloomington. Should be a game that Indiana looks to win. Wisconsin isn't as strong as they've been in previous years. You get a road trip to Ohio State, always tough. Maryland comes to Bloomington. Indiana heads to Minnesota. And then you get a senior day matchup against Rutgers on March 2nd at Assembly Hall before a road trip to Mackey Arena closes the regular season out. Jevan, these final 6 games, home road, home road, home road. What stands out to you as far as what IU fans should look for?
Well, that Wisconsin game is going to be another one that's really important, obviously for just Big Ten standings and then not playoff March implications.
Yeah.
But I look at that Ohio State game where we traveled to Ohio State. We haven't won there since 2017, so that's another place where we haven't had the most success, and we haven't had the most success against them. Period, whether it be home or away in the last few years.
Yeah.
But and they're a team that's gonna, at this point in the year, like you mentioned earlier, probably be a top 20 team in the country. So that's going to be a game that, if I was a Hoosier basketball player, I'm circling on my calendar. And also that game at Purdue, it wraps up our season. I don't want to think about it because I'm probably gonna be there as a reporter for Indiana, but it's something that we need to get that win heading into the Big Ten tournament, heading into March. So I would look forward to the Ohio State game and the Purdue game, both road games.
Yeah, that's a good point. Indiana has dropped their last 6 games at Mackey Arena, all in pretty lopsided fashion.
Yeah.
The closest game has been an 8-point margin. The average has been about 13 points per game in defeat in those last 6 contests at Mackey Arena. Of course, that's senior day for Purdue, and they've got a lot of guys who are likely going to play their last home game on March 5th. Along those lines, it's why I'm going to pay a lot of attention to this March 2nd home game against Rutgers. That's a big matchup. It's the final home game of the regular season. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of positive memories that IU fans make over the course of this upcoming 19-game home slate, but this is the final one of those home contests. It's going to be senior day for a lot of guys. And if they're not seniors, it could be the last home game for guys like Trace Jackson Davis or Xavier Johnson or some of the other guys on this team that have NBA aspirations. And then when you dig in even further, it's a game that could have massive Big Ten tournament and NCAA tournament implications. So that's one where I look at it and I say, look, it's the only time you face Rutgers all year. That's a tiebreaker game that could help in Big Ten tournament seeding. Could it help Indiana be a 4 seed instead of a 5 seed in the Big Ten tournament, or an 8 seed instead of a 7 seed instead of an 8 seed, or something like that? That's absolutely in the discussion. So Rutgers is a team that I think has a lot of similar aspirations to IU this year. That final home game should be pretty interesting. Jevan, I'm not going to ask you to predict Indiana's record today for the entire season. I did want to get your thoughts on the non-conference slate, but as you look at the different groups of games here, the different 2, 3, 4 game stretches that Indiana plays, what's one that you think Indiana really needs to do well in, and what's one that you're saying, look, even if Indiana loses, it's okay?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with maybe the one where we aren't as successful. And I mentioned that Purdue and Michigan, those back-to-back games, but I look a little bit farther down where you go to Wisconsin, where it's the game against Wisconsin, at Ohio State, Maryland, and then at Minnesota. I think that's a very important stretch, and it might not be one where you see the most success, and that is why that Rutgers game and that Purdue game following are so important in my eyes. And where I see them having, the most success, I think it is that stretch where it's January 9th through January 17th, Minnesota, and then at Iowa, and then at Nebraska. And I think anytime you can go on the road and win in the Big Ten, it's going to be important, especially at the end of the year. And I think, going to Iowa and going to Nebraska, and then even the game against Purdue, if we can somehow, find a way to win that game against Purdue, that 4-game stretch would be very important.
Yeah, as far as what I look at as a really tough set of games, you talked about that back-to-back against Purdue and Michigan, January 20th and January 23rd. Make no mistake, there's another tough 2-game stretch, February 19th and February 24th, back-to-back contest at Ohio State, home Maryland. In addition to the segment you talked about where IU really needs to be successful, you mentioned that mid-January stretch with Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska. The other one I've got my eye on where I want to see IU go 2-0, no questions asked, is this 2-game stretch at Minnesota, home Rutgers, February 27th and March 2nd. You're going to have heavy legs. You're going to have gone through a pretty tough Big Ten schedule, especially in the previous 10 to 12 games, likely against a bunch of ranked teams, likely against a bunch of teams that have 3, 4, 5 seed hopes in the NCAA tournament, not just bubble teams. Those 2 games at Minnesota, February 27th on a Sunday, home against Rutgers on March 2nd. That's a Wednesday, of course, senior day as well. Those are 2 games I think Indiana's got to go 2-0. Show that you guys have some gas left in the tank, because then at Purdue, Big Ten tournament, NCAA tournament, truly showtime to say the least. That's our breakdown, our rapid reaction breakdown of the IU men's basketball schedule here. The 2021-22 schedule was released earlier today on Wednesday, September 8th. We've got a full scale breakdown available over at indianahq.com. All you've got to do is head over to indianahq.com. It's the first article you see on the page. Mike Woodson's beautiful mug right there, looking right on the basketball court. It's got a full breakdown. It's got a screenshot of the schedule, as well as our thoughts as we highlight some of the key games. We also have the schedule up, and bookmark this page, share it with your friends and family. You just go to indianahq.com/schedule, and we're going to update this all year as times and TV designations come through. Make sure you bookmark it. Make sure you share it, indianahq.com/schedule. Meanwhile, we also have the Hoosier Sound podcast, where we broke down last night the Indiana loss to Iowa in week 1 of the football slate. But of course, the season will continue. They don't just stop it after one loss. The games will keep going on. We have a preview of Indiana's week 2 opponent, Idaho. All you have to do is go to indianahq.com and see these podcasts over on the right side. Or of course, you can just head over to the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts and tune in there. But that about wraps it up for our rapid reaction show. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your support, and stay tuned. We're going to have more of these over the course of the football and men's basketball season as news comes